I'd like to introduce Alan Cotton, who's been living in this area for generations, and I'd like to ask him a quick question about the elm. What did it look like when the elm was around in this landscape?
Before the Dutch elm came in 1961, if you were on West Pennant Hill, which overlooks the farm, you could look down across the valley, and it was very difficult in actual fact to see the fields because the fields were totally surrounded by elm trees, and it almost looked like a forest when viewed from a distance.
So now, of course, when you look down from Pennard Hill, it's quite clearly a patchwork of fields.
Yes, there are more trees now than there have been just after the elm disease killed the trees, but the situation is it's much clearer now. Yes, that hedge that you can see going across the side of the hill there, it actually starts just about there and goes up between those two trees. The situation is that there used to be another tree there. It was a continuous group, and that one had been felled for timber. That's why there's a gap between the two.
So the ones that Alan's were talking about here, those three large elms, are just going in that hedgerow between that field maple there and that field maple there by the gate. You told me a story about a blind man looking for farmland.
The situation was that my father told this story about the blind man and his son, the son was contemplating buying a farm, so that he actually drove with his horse and cart out into the fields that he was contemplating buying, and the father said, "Right, son," he said, "tie your horse up to the nearest elm tree," he said, "close to a bunch of nettles." And the son said, "Well, there's no elm trees and there's no nettles." So the old man said, "Drive on, son, that farm's no good to us."
And that's because the elm was such a telltale for good soil.
Elm was really an indication that there's a good depth of soil, and of course nettles only grow in high fertile soil as well. So,
thank you so much for that, Alan. It's really helpful to be able to look around the landscape here and understand what it was like when we still had the elm tree before the loss through Dutch Elm Disease, and to see what may be the case by the loss of the ash tree. What we're looking at is the level of planting that could bring us back to the 1950s, where there is still a significant amount of forest cover, rather than anything particularly ambitious. That's just looking at the forest cover of the last 60 years.
Here